first and just tell us about like what does a kindergarten teacher do on Wednesdays?
Okay, so my day probably starts the same, like about 6:30, just getting prepped for the day, because once we start the like the meetings, it's like boom, boom, boom. So I need to have all that stuff prepared. So then we have the staff meeting at 7:15, and then the social emotional buddies assembly. And then we meet with our class and we make slides for them to kind of go over what they're doing asynchronously. And then after that, we have office hours. So if anybody needs help with anything, or I've had like someone request me to work with their child during that time, I'm more than happy to do so. And then after that, we have our small group lessons, and we've been kind of basing ours off of the need that we felt like we needed more of the literacy, the retail for kindergarten and the comprehension piece. So we've been trying to gear our lessons towards that because we felt like we were missing a lot of that. And then we have some kids that go to special support staff teachers as well. And then after that, we get off and we get ready to go to planning, because we, like somebody else said too, we pre-plan. It's like having your slides ready. You have to have all the standards in there, make sure everything's standard based. We have to have our checklist made. I had to make a list. I couldn't remember everything. We start creating our newsletter for the following week. And that takes a lot of time too, because we try to make it easy for the parents to put in everything that they're going to be submitting, to be helpful, because sometimes it could be confusing looking at everything and what am I supposed to submit. So we try to make sure that everything's on there. And then we also make copies of things and make documents of hard copies of the lesson. Some, because say if a kid can't print, or they printed it and they lost it, or they didn't bring it home, that way they can still go to the newsletter, click it, print it. We also have to link all our links in there for all the Zooms, and our specials are switching. So we're constantly switching the specials on there as well, weekly. We also have to make all our lessons for those flex days. There's a lot of flex days according to CMS pacing. And we want to make sure the kids have something to do during that time, especially like on Wednesdays. Sometimes like there could be a flex day for skills, or it could be a flex day for modules. And we want to make sure the kids have something to do that day also for work at home. What else? I made myself some notes. So also another thing that takes up time too is we're trying to plan for our small groups. So I have an hour a day with my kids for a small group 4 times a week. And I have a TA that works with them too. So that's 4 lessons for her, 4 lessons for me, times 4 days. So that's a lot of lessons that I'm planning for that as well. And then we're responding to emails, working on data, so that we can do the small groups, and we have Canvas issues. Kindergarten also had an NCELI program we had to do. It was a 4-hour course that was outside of all the PD times. We had to try to fit that in wherever we could. We have to enter documentation into a system for the state, and we have to update that soon, actually. So I'm trying to find out when we're going to have time to do that as well. We need to enter documentation on all the kids. Then we usually have a lunch, and we're working lunch, and then we have our planning meeting for 90 minutes. And then we usually meet with our team after, and especially now that we have a new teacher on board, and we try to meet with her afterwards, just to kind of see what questions she has and how else we can support her. Sometimes we might have an MTSS meeting. We have PD classes. We have some kids that I have 3 fully remote kids also. So sometimes I might meet with them that day, so that if I saw the other kids in person and assess them, I don't have to take from their time during the week to assess my fully remote kids, where I can pull them on Wednesdays and assess them then. So that's worked out well. And just grading Canvas work, and then continuing to prep the materials that we just planned for. And then there's usually not enough time in that day. So I do spend all day Sunday. My entire Sunday is dedicated. I decided to take Saturdays off. That's my day to grocery shop, laundry, clean my house. That's just like Saturday things. But so then Sunday I turn around and I just get on my computer all day to finish, because that way I have to link all the Canvas links, and I try to make it easy so that it can go right to the lesson, and put dates on all the lessons and due dates. So that's kind of why that takes up a lot of time. So that's pretty much what it looks like for us.
I'm muted. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Miss Debo, can you tell us what a day is like for a kindergarten teacher on Wednesdays? What's that finger for, Miss Bentley?
First grade.
What did I say?
Kindergarten. Well, we'll take her.
You know what? I
One.
apologize. Miss Debo's first grade.
Love first grade. It's my
All
10th
right,
year.
Miss Debo, tell us about first grade.
Yes. I'm an early bird, so I'm up at 3:30. I'm on my computer. I typically grade the Canvas work from the previous day because it comes in at all times of day. But that way I can provide feedback and respond to emails and whatnot. 7:15 is our staff meeting. 8 o'clock, our buddy activity or assembly. 8:30, we have our morning meeting. And similar to as everyone had shared, it's an overview of the asynchronous work for the day. And first grade has planning at 9 o'clock. So we're always a little bit late to that, because my favorite times of the day are when the students stay on after the meeting or just the chit chat. So that tends to carry over into our grade level planning. We have that until 10:30. 10:30 is my first small group. So it's usually back to back again. I'm always on time. We have 4 small groups on Wednesdays, 20 minutes each. Have a little bit of lunch. And then I either meet with my team or my TA or EC staff. I also, like Jonelle, I'm a hybrid teacher, so I have students in person, students at home, but I also have students that are only online. So I use Wednesdays as extra time to meet with them because I would never see them in person. On Wednesdays, we also have PD, MTSS meetings, interventions. So lots of Zoom time on Wednesdays. But something I did want to share is just the outside work and the prep that is involved, all of the behind the scenes, because that is what we pour our time into. I've got my manuals here. We're basically taking this curriculum and making it virtual. My slide decks each day are at least 100 slides because my children are 6 and 7 years old and really thrive on visuals. So I'm lots of time creating those. And the Canvas assignments. We are building those daily, making videos face-to-face, recording audio, finding visuals, and just creating them in a way that's friendly for a first grader to be able to access. So it's not all muddied down, it's just very direct and it's there. But just the preparation of that, it takes hours. And that's where the bulk of my time outside of school.
Can't hear you, Dina.
Thank you, Miss Debo, for sharing a day in the life of first grade, not kindergarten. All right, okay. All right, so Miss Schmidt, today I wanted to talk to you guys about like what goes on asynchronous Wednesdays, because it's really hard, I think, for people to understand what happens on an asynchronous Wednesday because kids aren't here. Right. So tell me how your day usually starts on an asynchronous Wednesday, like time-wise and what you're doing.
Okay, so 8 o'clock, we all log in either to the school assembly or like yesterday we had buddies. So we do that till about 8:30. And then from 8:30, our kids log on to our own personal Zooms. And that is our time that we, like for me, that we do like our daily introduction where we do like a joke of the day and stuff. Just kind of finish the SEL stuff, the social emotional learning. And then we kind of talk about the different subject areas of the day. for example, yesterday we went through modules and I prepped them. We read the story together. We went through some of the questions. We did some discussions yesterday. And then after that, we move on to our next subject. So we introduce all of the learning material for that day while the kids are doing this, for the kids' asynchronous learning while we're in planning. So we went through all 4 of the subject areas, and that took me about an hour, so till about 9:30. And then from 9:30 to 10:45, I'm either pulling small groups, meeting with kids one-on-one to like talk about some of their works or things that are missing, or even progress monitoring. Like for example, right now we're doing mid-year benchmarks. So I was meeting with kids up till planning yesterday, getting that data for mid-year benchmarks.
And so what time do you have planning?
So we have planning at 10:45. So
Okay.
I like to pull my small groups in the morning between 9:30 and 10:45. It's just what's best for my class and their learning. We do better in the morning than in the afternoon. And then we go to planning at 10:45, and then we get done about 12:15. And then 12:30, I have my kids log back on, and it's a check-in. I go over assignments again, and then I do office hours for about an hour after that, and I have kids come on, or I ask kids to come on at a certain time. But like yesterday, it went till 2 o'clock. My office hours went till 2 o'clock because I had kids that needed help, or I had to finish assessing, and I needed to work with some kids on their that are on intervention plans.
So when do you have time for to be able to plan your lessons? I know you said that you guys have planning for 90 minutes, but besides that, when are you able to really plan for your classes?
Right.
By the day?
2 o'clock and on. It's just like right now is a crazy time because we have to get all this assessing done for mid-year benchmarks for our EL education curriculum. But normally office hours and stuff wouldn't go as long. I would probably go about 1:30 and then start 1:30 on with my planning. But like a lot of the things that the kids need help with, and I don't want to leave them hanging. So I make sure, and I work while I'm on office hours too, because kids don't always come on at the same time or certain times. But I do try to give them that opportunity if they need me to.
Are you working a lot outside of school hours to get planning stuff done?
I worked till 6 yesterday. But it's also because, I got to make sure my kids are okay too, but also we got intervention plans and kids that need help as well, because they have to get their core and their intervention on top of it. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, ladies. How are you doing today?
Good.
I have my light up hat on. I'm good.
Looks nice.
None for me.
The reason that I wanted to talk to you guys today is just about what does your schedule look like on Wednesdays? Like, what is a typical day for a 3rd grade teacher on Wednesdays?
I'll start, if that's okay with you, Ms. Dunbar. So we start the morning in our weekly staff meeting at 7:15. And then as soon as our staff meeting is over, depending on the Wednesday of the month, it's either an assembly, a school-wide assembly, or our buddy groups. And we stay with them from 8 to 8:30. At 8:30, we log in with our team teacher. So Ms. Dunbar and I log in with all of our students, and we do like our Wednesday morning meeting, essentially. Our Wednesday morning meetings look a little different than our other days, because not only do we do a social emotional lesson, but we make sure the kids understand their assignments for the day, since it's asynchronous learning. And so we're doing that from about 8:30 to 9:15. And at 9:15, we start working with small groups. The way Ms. Dunbar and I have it planned with our kids is that we have 3 groups of students. And so we do 2 30-minute rotations. So we have 2 small groups that we see. So like group 1 and group 2, I might meet with group 1 first, Ms. Dunbar might meet with group 2 first, and then at 9:45 we switch. and meet with the other group. The third group meets with one of our support staff teachers at 10 o'clock. So they have a little asynchronous time, but they have been staying on Zoom and just joining our groups until they go at 10 o'clock. So they kind of have a group and a little bit, and then their 10 o'clock group. We also have some students who meet with others, with support teachers like ESL and EC, and our TD meets with an adult that day as well. And we also have a group meeting with Miss Bros, our literacy facilitator, that day. At 10:15, the technical 2 30-minute rotations are over, but we tend to extend a little bit. And usually we send the kids off for the day around 10:30. There have been times, depending on the situation at hand, depending on if we need to, meet with a kid or whatnot. Sometimes we will meet individually with some kids after those 2 rotations. Right now we're doing a lot of benchmark testing in literacy. So we're doing some things like that where sometimes we have to meet one-on-one, and it makes sense to do it after those groups sometimes. And then after that, the teachers head to planning. We plan with our TD teacher during our planning time. And so she flip-flops between math and literacy planning. Miss Bros will meet with us in literacy also. Miss Bentley meets with math. But we spend time not only deciding what we're going to be teaching, but also previewing the Canvas modules, because a lot of the times, based on decisions we're making on with our students in mind, we have to tweak what has been given to us from the district, because it's not a one-size-fits-all platform for all of our kids. So we add a lot of resources. We take away some things that aren't necessary, trying to be sure that what we're asking the kids to do is the most important tasks, and that they are, with the standards in mind, making sure that we're covering what needs to be covered. So not only are we deciding what we want to do and teach, but then we have to kind of rework what's been given to us, which takes a good amount of time. And then unfortunately, we also have like an additional planning time to meet with our EC teachers, because they're pulling groups those days. So we tend to do that either Mondays before we start meeting with students, usually around 7:15 we'll do that. Or like yesterday, we met with her at like 3 o'clock, just based on when she had groups and that kind of thing. So her schedule is a little different. So we try to work around that to be sure we can still meet with her. And
about how much time are you spending on planning on Wednesdays, like just getting things ready for the kids?
Well, I think in addition to the hour-and-a-half planning that we have, we tend to do a little bit of pre-planning just to make sure that the time that we're spending is really valuable and we're getting a lot accomplished. I'd say,
Yeah.
we definitely I definitely work after school, and I'm sure that everybody does as well, because that's when we can grade our papers, and that helps give us a vision of what our students need for those small groups, not just on Wednesday, but on all of the days that we have our small group. So a lot of time spent on planning, evaluating, and then prepping for the next week.
Yeah, and I would, like, for example, yesterday, I know Jessica and I took a 30-minute break. So from 10, we extended our time. We finished up with our kids about 10:45 yesterday. Jessica and I started planning about 11. And then I was on Zoom with the exception of like a 30-minute lunch until 3 o'clock when I went to the MTSS meeting. And I was on that meeting until about 3:45. So, I sat in front of my screen the whole day.
Right.
And that did not include, like Ms. Dunbar said, that did not include grading papers.
Right.
I sat and did that until about 5:15 last night. knowing like the end of the quarter is coming up and we need to make sure we have everything entered. And that is not just a end of the quarter kind of thing. That I would say at least 5:30 every day, if not longer.
Right. And I feel like, you know, when parents get home from work, they have the opportunity to look at their kids' work in Canvas and on PowerSchool. And so we get a lot of questions after hours. And rather than wait until the next day, you know, if it's something that's possible, I like to respond to them that day so they have that immediate feedback.
Yeah, and during our planning on Wednesdays, I mean, we get Canvas messages from kids and we try our best to be sure, you know, we get those answered in a timely manner since they're using that working time. We want to make sure they can keep working and not, you know, get to a point where they can't continue because they're waiting on an answer from us.
Well, thank you so much, ladies. I appreciate you taking the time to tell us about what your typical day looks like on Wednesdays and kind of what, you know, how you're spending your time outside of school time to make sure that we meet the needs of all of our kids. So thank you. All right. So Ms. Crocker, we want to find out more information about kind of what Asynchronous Wednesday looks like for teachers. And also I wanted to know, like, how much time do you have to spend planning lessons and those kinds of things? So I guess the first thing is about Asynchronous Wednesdays. Like, what does a typical day look like for a teacher?
Okay, so a typical day for the teacher on a Wednesday would, well, you know, I'm logging on before 7:15 because that's exactly when our staff meeting would typically begin. So I'm on at least 30 or so minutes before that, just checking emails and kind of getting, you know, things lined up for the day. Then we would have a staff meeting. Then we have 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, there's either assembly or a buddy activity, as you know, for students. And so teachers will be involved with that. Immediately after the assembly or buddy meeting, then we begin our morning Zoom meeting with students. And so that really looks like, we usually start that at about 8:40 after a little brain break after the buddy and assembly, about 8:40 for about an hour. So usually it's either we end between 9:30 and 9:40, which I know goes over a little bit. But during that time, we are giving overviews of the lessons that students are going to be doing asynchronously. And we are also either working in a mini lesson or some modeling of something that we're going to be expecting them to do that day as well. Most of the time, we're able to split that time and spend part of that time on some math and part of that time on some literacy, but it can be flexible. Like, for example, this week, we had to spend that entire time on literacy because of what the students were going to be asked to do in some research groups. So it's different week by week, but that time is used rather flexibly, but there is some instruction or modeling during that morning time. And so then after that, we have a few minutes and then go into our grade level planning with our PLCs. That's about an hour and a half. Then there are some small groups. So each students, even on asynchronous day, they still meet with a small group for 30 minutes. Those small groups are used to review skills, enhance skills. Right now, we're focusing on math with the idea that we're going to do that for a few weeks and then switch to literacy so that we can do, you know, more thematic type things. Like, for example, some of our students spend that small group time doing Math Olympiad, while others right now are working on some math fact fluency, but just things that students need to do to grow themselves. And we also, let's see, after that, it's like a lunch, and then we have office hours. Students may participate in office hours one of three ways. Either the teacher requests it, so that would be a time that we're checking in with students if we are noticing that they're needing extra help, if we're noticing that they're not completing things, if there's anything that we really want to work with students on in either a small group or sometimes even individually. We would ask them to come to office hours, but students can also request to come to office hours, and parents can request for students to come to office hours. So it's not just like a by teacher invitation. There are kind of 3 ways to get in.
So then, like after that your office hours end at about what time?
Well, on Wednesdays it's different. We do it earlier on Wednesdays. So on Wednesdays it would end about 1 o'clock.
So what do
Usually
y'all
1:30.
do the rest of the day then? What are the teachers doing the rest of the day?
So after the office hours, we meet again as a team, because to kind of follow up on some of the action items that we laid out in planning. And we start then trying to begin building the next week, because we've just talked about it in planning earlier that day.
And then, so like about how much time is a 4th grade teacher spending outside of the regular school day on tasks and things that have to be done that are related to school?
A lot. A lot. I would say, gosh, a typical day, probably 3 or 4 hours, and then a very significant part of the weekend. So it's getting better. It is getting better. I spend most of Sunday after I get home from church into the evening is school, because I've tried to start taking Saturday off from school. I tried to start taking Sunday off, and that never worked because I wasn't done with Saturday and it would just always roll into Sunday. So I've really been trying to take Saturday off.
Good. Yeah. Anything else you want to add about just planning time and like maybe any struggles or anything?
I guess I would like for everyone to know that, you know, the preparation and the time that goes into putting Canvas lessons, just putting them together and organizing them in a way that we feel students can actually navigate through independently. That's a lot of behind the scenes work. And in addition to that, we are needing to really look at work very regularly so that we know how to plan for our smaller groups, as well as for the the whole class groups that we do. So we're the planning and the preparation, while it might seem like it would be less, it's easily double.
Wow. All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing that information. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And I would also, one other thing that I would say that takes up a lot of time, and I should have mentioned this earlier, that takes up a lot of time just kind of throughout the day, is that at any given time, we have remote children. And they have a question, they're reaching out to us. So we are getting pinged almost constantly by kids at home that have questions, and we want to be responsive to that and answer them, because we know in many situations they can't move forward until they get that answered. So I think a lot of the things that maybe some folks might think that are getting handled during the school day, like grading and putting together a newsletter, planning and updating some modules, a lot of times that's really not happening to the extent that we'd like it to, because we're busy responding to children and their inquiries from remote land.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being so responsive. I know that
I hope
a lot of families appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, and our final teacher tonight is we want to hear from is Miss Cook. Miss Cook teaches 5th grade. So Miss Cook, what's an average day like for a 5th grader on Wednesdays, especially?
So the only thing that's really different for a 5th grader on Wednesdays for us is they have that bonus SEL time of an assembly. So for a 5th grade teacher, we start off with our staff meeting at 7:15, had to move those from too late in the afternoon because we were wilting by then. At 8 o'clock, they have their assembly meetings. We typically attend those just because we want to be able to mention what was done in those meetings in our own SEL meetings. Students are on at 8 then for that. 8:30 is our homeroom SEL morning meeting, whatever you want to call it. That's usually from 8:30 to 9. Depending on the day, Miss Williams and myself will introduce, you know, the module, the lesson, whatever we can do. Fifth graders are a little bit more independent in that regard. But then Miss Williams and I have divvied up the day in half. So I have ELA from 9 to 11:30 on Wednesdays, and she has math from 12:30 to, I think it's 3. And then we divvy that up based on small groups, however we see fit. So some weeks we have office hours if the kids need it. Some weeks we are literally back to back 6 small groups if that's what the kids need that week. I've already started making my groups for the Wednesday after break because that's just the way it works. The kids, and I think this goes for besides, you know, outside of Wednesdays as well for 5th graders, the only time they're really not required to be like, I mean, I know they have asynchronous time, but they have lunch and recess or a brain break time, whatever you want to call it, from 11:30 to 12:30. Other than that, they always have the option to stay on screen with us. And in 5th grade, a lot of the times we say, hey, if you want a private breakout room, stay in there, pop back in the main session when you need one of us, and we'll be here for you. And there is always a child popping back in with questions and whatnot. So I just feel like a lot of kids are staying on all the time. That way it feels more normal. When they go in a private breakout room, it's basically just like independent work in the classroom. And instead of me walking up and down, you know, or around the groups or whatever you want to call it, they're sitting in a private breakout room and popping back in to ask the question. If no one's popping back in, which that never happens, but if that were to happen, then I'm going breakout room to breakout room to breakout room. So when I am not with the children in the morning, then my afternoon is planning time, data time, MTSS time, Canvas time. The amount of Canvas messages I get from 5th graders, because they do like to be independent, which I love, they will email me, can you regrade this? Can you look at this? Can we meet on this? So, I mean, if you think about 40 children with 2 subject areas and about 4 graded assignments per day, that's a lot. And when I say graded, it doesn't necessarily mean something in Power School, but I think what people forget with virtual learning is that if we were in the classroom, you know, a kid would be writing something in a notebook and I'd get to go around and check and see every single notebook and say, okay, mental note, this one needs more, this one is ready to fly. But we don't have that flexibility right now. So I have to look at every single piece of submitted work, whether independent, whether it's group, whether it's an exit ticket or not. So I am looking at a minimum of 120 assignments a day. And if I'm not getting 120, then I'm tracking down children and parents and, you know, saying, hey, I need to know if they've got this because I got to figure out what I can do for them. So today, I think it's 280 things that I had to look at. And that's without reassignments, like resubmissions, anything like that. So on a Wednesday, maybe I'd be done by 4 o'clock with meetings, but that's not grading. That's not fixing anything in Canvas. And if you shut off early on any given day, then you're just tacking on more time, you know, to the next day. So it's not a bad thing. You know, this is the world we're living in right now, and we get it. But to meet our students' needs, especially anybody who is not getting the support at home or, you know, doesn't have the help that they need or aren't getting the concept, we are working endlessly to make sure that they are getting as much as they can.
Thank you, Ms. Cook.